That said, there's different kinds of design competitions. There's open international design competitions, which are exactly what they sound like. They're open to all professionals. They cast a very broad net. Then there's invited design competitions, where typically Dovetail will work very closely with the client, and Dovetail creates what we call a long list. And we present that to the client.
Welcome to another exciting episode of Nkoto Building Arts. I'm your host, Nkoto, and today I'd like to welcome another great guest whom I've been anxiously waiting to speak with, Susanna Sirefman. Susanna is the founder and president of Dovetail Design Strategists, the leading independent architect selection firm in the United States. With over 1.5 billion worth of projects completed, Dovetail leads custom design international architecture competitions, requests for proposals, or interview-based searches for complex building projects. Susanna trained as an architect at the renowned Architectural Association School of Architecture in London and draws from her extensive knowledge of the latest design and building trends to provide her clients with the unmatched access to both emerging and acclaimed talent in architecture. A few of her notable projects include the new Welcome Center at the Storm King Art Center in New Windsor, New York, the International Design Competition for the Portland Museum of Art Campus Unification and Expansion Project in Portland, Maine, and the design selection for the New York Public Library Midtown Campus renovation project in Manhattan, New York. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Susanna Sirefman to the podcast. How are you today, Susanna?
Hi, Nkoto. Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Awesome. And let me tell you, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your time. So to start off, I love unique building designs, and the cultural arts industry that you and I are both a part of, affords us the opportunity to see these unique designs. And you, in your position, you have the unique pleasure of gathering these teams and selecting these teams to even start the whole process. So my intention for this interview, as I told you before, is to learn, and to allow my audience to understand the complexities and how to properly run one of these selection processes. So that's kind of what we want to talk about today. But before we start that and get into that, I'd like to know a little bit about you and your background and how you got started in this unique process.
Right. Well, I'm an architect by training, and I am originally from New York. But in fact, actually, the idea for Dovetail came when I was living in London. I hold a diploma from the Architectural Association School of Architecture in London. And while I was there, I was commissioned to write a book on contemporary architecture in Chicago. So one of my summers I spent marching all over, I think it's 228 square miles of Chicago, looking at buildings and meeting with architects. And the book was called Chicago, A Guide to Recent Architecture. And it was 100 buildings all built within the last 10 years. And I didn't realize at the time, but I think that really, I realized that not all buildings are created equal and not all architects are the same. So I think that the foundations were laid then for Dovetail. Years later, people were asking me, who should I use for this and who should I use for that? And it really it is a process. And all of my work, though, is driven by my really deep belief that architectural design excellence is necessary for quality of life, and also that design excellence is a basic human right. It should be accessible to everybody. So everything that Dovetail does is really, based on that. And now we're the leading independent architect selection firm, and we have well over $1.5 billion worth of projects that have been constructed.
Yeah. So now you went to school for it. So you had was it a love for it? Did you originally start off in architecture, or you sort of made your way to architecture? Sometimes when we speak, I speak to some people and they have these unique paths to get into their careers, but it sounds like you sort of started off with a love for
Actually,
architecture.
I no, I didn't. And actually, I do have a
Okay.
sort of unique kind of odd story that I actually was a serious musician, and I had played the cello and gone to Juilliard pre-college when I was very young. And in fact, I had won a scholarship to study in London with a very famous cello teacher, and I was there and I met someone who was studying at the Architectural Association, and I was absolutely amazed at the conversation about, studying architecture is the opposite of studying music. Music is like being
Hmm.
an athlete, and you're very in your own cocoon world, and it's absolutely extraordinary if you're enjoying it. But I think I had reached a point where music isn't something you do because you can, you do it because you love it. And I went to the AA just to sort of check things out, and I was just amazed by how everyone was talking about everything.
Hmm.
Um, so I had a career switch and went to
Hmm.
the AA and became an architect. But I have to say, I think that my music background has served me very well because it taught me a kind of discipline. And I think a lot of architecture, certainly in the design, is about iteration and looking at things over and over again in different angles. And that's really very similar to learning and studying and playing a piece of music.
I
So
guess it's, I guess it's really strenuous too. You have to be really focused to be an architect, and you have to be really focused to be great at playing an instrument.
absolutely. I think you have to be really focused to be good at anything, but
Mm,
I think that they're very similar disciplines. There's a very famous quote of Goethe that says, "Architecture is frozen music," um,
mm.
and
I can
I
see
think
that. I
it's
can see that.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Great, great. That's great background. So Dovetail, to get into your company, so Dovetail leads organizations through a journey, as you would call it, through selecting an architect. So how do organizations typically find you to lead that process for them?
Right. Well, we work with a wide range of inspired, forward-looking, and high-profile cultural, institutional, civic, educational, and developer clients, and we will work with the occasional individual. We curate and lead the critically vital, important architect or design team selection process for major capital projects across the country. And I like to say our proven track record really means that Dovetail is now the go-to
Right.
for those looking for design excellence and a fair, equitable, transparent process. We've had an outside influence on the field, and we're really proud to sort of gotten the word out there about design competitions and raised the bar for the structure and format for design competitions across the field. Our approach has really made waves, within the museum, the design, and adjacent professional communities. One of the things, one of the interesting things is how much when a competition is public, it gets a lot of it does have a lot of
Mhm.
influence. And when we ran a competition recently for Portland Museum of Art, we asked for inclusivity and accessibility consultants to be part of the team. And this created quite a ripple amongst the architectural community. What do you mean by it? Who are they? And
Mhm.
we were going above and beyond universal access. We really wanted people to think about, turning the museum inside out. And subsequent to that, I think a lot of architects are looking to team up with inclusivity and accessibility consultants for other projects, and institutions are looking at bringing on that particular expertise. So we're always thinking about the big picture. I'm not, I'm
Mhm.
not sure I answered your question about
Yeah,
how
yeah,
how
no, you
how
have,
clients
yeah.
come to us, but I think we have you do good work
Right, right.
and
Right. Speaking of the inclusivity aspect of it, has been a lot of pushback lately? It seems like I've been seeing some pushback on that process lately, but in the media, I guess. But
certainly not in our world. I mean, that
not
we're all about, as I said, design excellence is a basic human right.
Right.
And architecture is not something frivolous, and it's not an add-on. Sometimes there is a public misperception
Mm.
that architecture is what you do afterwards. The analogy I like to give for that is that people have a legal question, they go to a lawyer. People have a medical question, they go to a doctor. People
Right.
want to build a house, they don't always go to an architect.
Yeah.
And we see that as false economy. They should be going to someone who can really understand their needs. And it doesn't mean it has to be usually expensive. In fact, it's just the opposite. So yes, the political world is a whole nother separate
Yeah.
discussion. But
Yeah.
we are steadfast that architecture and cultural institutions and housing, everybody
Mhm.
deserves the best possible design.
Amen to that. I would assume that most organizations that hire you are existing organizations looking to expand the program, or are there many new organizations as well that hire you?
Right. Well, this is a great question. We typically come onto projects quite early, and we assist with pre-project strategy and figuring out what the right project is for the institution, whether they've been around for 100 years or if they're a brand new startup. There is a new need, it's not a new need, but there's a need for new kinds of community hubs for so many reasons, not only to showcase art and artifacts. I think our work in Orlando, Florida is representative of an example of a project where it wasn't an existing institution. And this was a city that had a need to have a place to all be together, to grieve, to heal, a need that came out of a tragedy. And that project was following the mass shooting in a gay nightclub in Orlando. In 2016, there was a foundation which was formed, the One Pulse Foundation. And they were established to develop a memorial for the 49 victims who were tragically killed. And they had an amazing credo, which was, "We will not let hate win."
Mhm.
So Dovetail, with this a big tall order, with this in mind, we ran what we called the National Pulse Memorial and Museum International Design Competition, seeking an architect-led design team for a memorial and a museum to commemorate the victims of the tragedy. And tough project, getting it right always matters. But when a project's focus is honoring lives taken, there really is a fragility and a rawness that must be accounted for. And our competition garnered worldwide attention. It was a two-stage open international competition. We got hundreds of submissions, and it was amazing to see how the design world really stood in solidarity with
Mhm.
Pulse. And the 6 finalist firms displayed their diverse concept designs at an exhibition, which was curated by us. And really, the main purpose of that was to hear feedback from the victims' families, the first responders, the survivors. And the resulting winning concept is visionary. And I think much due to our process, in 2021, President Biden signed a bill that designated the project a national memorial. So I think that's a good example of something that didn't
Mhm.
exist. There was a community need.
Yeah.
That said, a lot of our other projects are for existing institutions who have been around for 100, 200 years, and they're typically doing the largest capital project that they will ever do.
Right.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah, yeah. On the One Pulse, as a cost consultant, I'm a cost consultant as well. We did go after that project to be a part of it, but we came up just short. Didn't get it. Didn't get the. Didn't get the commission.
Uh,
But I thought I just add that in there. But
just keep trying, and
we'll keep
they're
trying.
and it's always, I think I'm doing these things, there's team spirit. So I'm sure that
Yeah,
the architect that you were working with,
yeah,
there'll be
yeah.
something else down the line.
Exactly. And I'm only 2 hours down the road, so I'm in Tampa, Florida. So yeah.
Oh,
But
okay. Right. Right. Right.
uh, so generally speaking, what's involved? Take me through what's involved in a typical architectural selection process. Like how long did it take? What are the sort of stages of the whole process?
So that's also a complicated question because there's
Okay.
many different kinds of architect or design team selection processes. So there's competitions, which everybody understands, where you are commissioning a concept design. We won't run a competition unless there's an honorarium for the short list. So they're compensated. We very much see our job as structuring the dialogue with the design team before the design team is there. And we want to show, on both sides that there's respect for work being done. That said, there's different kinds of design competitions. There's open international design competitions, which are exactly what they sound like. They're open to all professionals. They cast a very broad net. Then there's invited design competitions, where typically Dovetail will work very closely with the client, and Dovetail creates what we call a long list. And we present that to the client, who then decides who on that long list they want to reach out to. So it's by invitation only. Then within those two frameworks, there's many other kinds of parameters. Sometimes there's limited, where for a particular reason, it's limited to a geographic area, or limited that students who aren't yet licensed can apply. So there's many different kinds of categories within that. Then frequently we will also run, in addition to competitions, which once again involve concept design, we will do what we like to call either an architect selection process or a design team selection process. And sometimes we'll even run landscape architect selection processes or architect of record selection process. And that is more of an request for qualifications, to be followed by a request for proposal, and then interviews. And there's also various different permutations of that, and that can sometimes be invited as well. That can be open. So I think it's fantastic that in the States we have these many different kinds of processes, and as long as they're fair, equitable, and transparent, I think that they're all the ones that we run are usually successful. And we work very early on with our clients in figuring out what kind of selection process makes sense.
Okay. Well, that leads me to the next question is, what are the different procurement methods of selecting an architect, and how do you decide which one will be used?
So I just kind of run through all the different procurement methods. And how we decide, sometimes it's based on resources, sometimes it's based on an idea that the client has of the kind of architect that they're looking for. We've run competitions where the client really wanted to promote young architects.
Okay.
So it really depends. It's all based very much on the client's needs.
Do you have a specific a favorite that you like to use?
Um,
I guess
no,
I guess it depends on
I
what
think,
the client needs. So
yeah, I think
there's no real
I think it
favorite.
really depends. And I think that we've for all of these processes, we have a very sort of proprietary approach, where what I have to say about all of them that I think that we do differently from other people is that we very much feel like the competitor and the client should have as much interaction as they possibly can within this framework and the structure of whichever process makes sense. I think that the projects that we work on are long-term projects. So the client and the design team are going to be together anywhere from 2 to 4 to 5 years. So in addition to understanding an architect's philosophy and approach and their concept or their vision, you got to like each other.
Right.
So, we feel like chemistry is super important. So no matter what the process is, we're very keen to always incorporate as much face-to-face
Mm.
interaction between competitor and client as we can.
So as far you facilitate the whole process, but as far as selecting the architect, it's a team of people. I guess the community involvement, the board, and yourselves to select the team. How does that process all play out for most of the procurement methods?
Well, so we also like to include as much public engagement as we possibly
Mm.
can. We firmly believe that buildings are for their users, and it's only the
Right.
users who know what they need best. And more often than not, the users are the local community. So it varies from process to process, also in time frame. But certainly when we're doing open international design competitions, we have a very robust public engagement which is almost one of my favorite parts of running the
Mhm.
competitions, where we like to have a representative from each of the shortlist finalist teams come and speak to the public. It's an opportunity where the public can ask questions. For the Portland Museum of Art in Maine, which I've referenced before, we did this and we were going to have it at the museum, but it was sold out. So we ended up having so many people at the University of Southern Maine. It was a sold out evening. And it was just delightful. It was also fun from the aspect of the architects getting to be in the same room with one
Mhm.
another, getting to see one another's work. And in fact, one of the architects said to me afterwards, I've been thinking about this problem, how do you solve this architectural problem for so long? I thought this was
Mhm.
the only way
Okay.
to do it. And it was just so amazing to see other really beautiful examples, which I
Yeah.
thought was very generous and collegiate for
Right,
Portland.
right. For competitors.
Right. Yeah, 'cause normally you don't get to see what the other person is
Right.
thinking. So we
Yeah.
do that. And then we also very frequently, we did this for Portland, we did this for Swamp Pulse, we will curate and design what I like to call a concept design gallery. Um, which is where each of the shortlisted teams is given a very equitable, fair space. And we're fairly descriptive in what they can show so that the public can compare apples to apples, not apples to
Mhm.
oranges. And the public is invited to come see and share and tell us what they're thinking. And then my office takes all of those comments. And in the case of Portland, it was over 2,000 comments. And we categorize and collate that and make sure that the jury sees it. So while it's not a public vote, the jury is informed as to the concerns, interests of the general public. And then also for all of our projects, whether they're an open competition or not, we very much like to say that the scope of work for the incoming winning design team will include program verification and public engagement. I'm super proud of the amount of projects that we do that get built. Very few have not gotten built. And they also happen very quickly. And I think part of that is that we have an understanding that the stakeholders, who more often not are the public, really do need to be involved in programming and design. So, throughout there's this sense that we build this aspect into our processes.
Now, you speak of it happens pretty quickly. Is there a certain schedule, a typical schedule or rule of thumb of how long they take? I asked that because I've seen projects where, especially in the cultural space, where they've been in planning for 10 years, 15 years. So the whole process of your portion of it, how long does it normally take?
So our portion can be, depending on the process, a typical open international design competition is maybe 10 months to a year. I think that there's a rhythm to it. I don't think that it should be any longer. I
Yeah.
think that, on the client side, they can get consultant fatigue. And on the architect side, it's a business decision to enter. And, I don't want to tie up somebody's time for months and months and months working on something if they're not ultimately going to get it. So
Right.
we try and be as fair as possible about, the time frame. Sometimes processes are shorter. I mean, we've run everything from a whiplash 2 month,
Okay. Oh,
interview process where the client needed to hit the ground running with the right team immediately to 4 to 6 months. But more often than not, it's, between the 8 months to a year for a proper, and that builds in also the front end part for Dovetail. We have a discovery. We work in 3 phases: discovery, development, and execution. And our discovery phase is what we were talking about before. We're figuring out, what does the client actually need? Sometimes, we've had clients come who don't really need a building, they need a master plan. And discovery phase, figuring out who the stakeholders are, who the decision makers are, how we can incorporate public engagement, how we can build upon public engagement. Very frequently, culture institutions have come to us when they've spent a couple of years running very informative and useful community engagement that we then can build upon. So yeah.
okay. I want to ask, are you involved with site selection and fundraising? But really before that, um, I would think you come on board once the financing is in place or the funding for the building is in place, or do you come on board prior to that?
So this is another great question. It also varies from project to project, but we do like to come on board. Once again, I like stuff to get built. I don't like to
Yeah.
waste anybody's
Right,
time.
right. That's what.
So I like to know that there's definitely, certainly what we call seed money, that at least there's been either an investment from the local government or the federal government, or they have a major donor on board. So we come on typically when they know that the fundraising is possible. I don't typically, I think it's a waste of everyone's time, quite frankly, running a design competition to get interest in something so that they can possibly see if they can raise money.
Mhm.
We like to
Right.
know that it's a serious project. But we are actually involved, you know, enhanced fundraising opportunities is definitely an aspect of a Dovetail design competition. We build that in, and not through, sort of sexy rendering and models, but in showing that our client is doing their due diligence and really making a meaningful investment in design excellence. So I think, we do see, while I'm not a fundraising consultant in any way,
Mhm. Mhm.
do work with fundraising consultants. And when in our discovery phase, we work very hard to align aspirations with fundraising capabilities. We've had clients come to us and say, they want a project of such scale, but they think
Mhm.
they only have this amount of money. So then, we work very closely with them to say, well, hey, maybe can you raise more money? Or if you can't, it needs to be a different kind of project. And what does that project look like? So we do that. As far as site selection, yes, not on every project, but we've had a number of projects now where we're part of that conversation.
Mhm.
And I think and I love that aspect actually. We did a very interesting project for Jacob's Pillow, which is the oldest dance company and dance festival, I should say, in the States, in the Berkshires, Massachusetts, who have an extraordinary, beautiful site, 30 buildings. Very, very beautiful. It's been around, I think, for over 100 years. And during the pandemic, as if things couldn't get any worse, one of their theaters, they had two major theaters, burnt to the ground.
Wow.
Yeah, so they did an extraordinary job of making lemonade out of lemons, and they
Mhm.
hired Dovetail. And part of our initial discussions during that discovery phase, which were very intense, was do we actually build on the site that this was burnt down on, or do we actually try and find another site? And ultimately, through our work together and that of some other technical consultants that we were working
Mhm.
with, it
Mhm.
was decided to actually build on the site. So
Mhm.
yes, we do get involved with that.
Yeah, and I guess that's more in the feasibility study portion of the project. So you have some uh, participation in that as well. So one other question I have for you is, do most organizations, this is a vision question, do most organizations have a vision of what they want, or do they need help in developing that vision? You sort of touched on that a little bit, but
Right, right.
I,
You ask fantastic questions. I mean,
I,
that's a tough one. I think all organizations do have a vision. I think how realistic that vision is varies.
right.
And I think it really does vary from organization to organization. I mean, some have this very big picture idea of what they want to offer, but they don't know how to do that.
Mm,
And others have a very, very clear, very almost surgical, we know we want this intervention, we know where we want it, we know how we want it. So it really does vary from project to project, which is why we do this discovery phase because we're not interested in duplicating or replicating any work that's been done by
mm,
consultants before. We frequently come on after a strategic plan has been done, which is very useful and helpful for us. And there's this sort of very broad, big picture idea
mm,
of what we want. That said, yeah, my example earlier, that we have had organizations come and say, we really want to do a new building, and we've taken a look and we've said, well, so much deferred maintenance and this and that and the
right.
other. Maybe we should do a master plan first and see where you can, get the
Mm,
most bang for
mm,
your buck. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm incredibly lucky. I have super sophisticated, smart clients. So, they definitely do come with a vision. How
right.
how how worked out it is
Yeah,
varies.
yeah, I got you. Okay. So most organizations have a board of directors or trustees. Can you explain your relationship with a typical board? How does that process work?
Right. Well, we work very closely with trustees, senior leadership. That's typically who we're working the most closely with, and I think it's super interesting in America for the way the culturals are funded are
Hmm.
by philanthropy, and I think in a way we're very lucky that people are willing to fund all of this, and they get very involved. I mean, I don't know if people realize quite how hard work it is being on a trustee
Yeah.
building selection committee. It's a big time commitment, and a big thought commitment. And I just love all the trustees that we get to work with. And I like to think of Dovetail very much as in a partnership with the institutions that we're working with, that they're getting the Dovetail brand and our expertise and our really broad reach in the design world. Um, and we elevate projects, I have to say. I think we really do elevate them, and we're getting the incredible institutional knowledge of
Mhm.
trustees and senior leadership. So, once again, I'm very lucky. I think that at the very least, our clients understand that good design is good business.
Mhm.
And I think more often than not, it goes way beyond that. And they're very interested in world-class architecture.
Yeah. Yeah. I can Good information. So what is the most creative? Here's the question. What is the most creative solution to a programming problem or a client need that an architect has presented? And you've been a part of all of these wonderful presentations of renovations, expansions, new builds. I would assume some difficult sites. So what are some of the best creative solutions that you've seen?
Well, I love all the projects. So this is sort of asking me to pick my favorite child.
Put you on the
But
spot there.
But in fact, actually, I think of all the outcomes, they're all stellar, but I happen to get to see one of our projects daily, which is the competition that we ran for the city of New York for new sidewalk sheds, new scaffolding. And it's now up all over the city. And while it's not a building, it was an incredibly complex problem with a
Mhm.
really beautiful solution.
Uh,
So yeah, when we were hired by the Bloomberg administration, who they really, they believed that New York City deserved better than the dark, dirty,
mhm.
unattractive sidewalk sheds. You used to be able to you'd walk by and there'd be tape around the bolts, and if there wasn't, you'd rip your clothing kind of thing.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but I was shocked when starting the project. It doesn't look that complex, right? It's
Yeah.
four legs and something you can stand
Right.
on.
Right.
But they're really complex. They have to protect pedestrians. They have to protect, all different kinds of debris that is falling at different speeds. They have to fend off varied wind loads. They have to straddle the city's sloping sidewalks, which every sidewalk you're on is a different grade. So it's a really complicated question. And so the competition that Dovetail created, we really challenged architects and engineers to completely reimagine the sidewalk shed while ensuring, its important functions. And Dovetail pushed very hard for radical change. We were not interested in incremental change. So, we thought that changes on the margin just really weren't going to cut it. And the
Mhm.
winning design, it had to be safer, because you weren't going to do something that was just as safe, right? It'd be safer,
Right.
provide better storefront access, create a 180-degree different experience for pedestrians. Um, and the one that won, it uses state-of-the-art building technologies. It's easily installed. It also had to complement a mix of streetscapes. This wasn't only meant for Manhattan, it's for all 5 boroughs.
Mhm.
And it really had to be aesthetically pleasing to everybody, which is, you can imagine how difficult that is.
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
But the winning design, Urban Umbrella, really they hit it out of the park. So
Okay.
I really think that and it's all over the city now, in all 5 boroughs. And I have to say, every time I see it, it brings a smile to my face.
Awesome. I need to see some pictures of that. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, this leads me to another question: is how important is the architect's consulting team in deciding which architect will be selected? Their engineers, their entire team.
Right. Which I can see why it's of interest to the cost consultants.
uh, Yeah.
I think it's very important. We see the architects' choices as the first challenge of a competition. I don't like forced marriages, so we very often will go to an architect-led team, and then we will ask the architect to create that team. And I think it's super interesting who is on that team and a reflection of their understanding of the brief that we've just issued. I think in terms of expertise, in terms of diversity, in terms of locale. I think architects underestimate it, but I think it's super, super, super important.
Awesome. Um, so I have another question. This is my ask the experts question. What's You're the expert, so here you go. What's one piece of advice you would give an architect that will put them in the best position to win an architectural competition, if you can divulge that?
I think I think it's what we've been talking about. I think it's
Mhm.
really read the design brief,
Okay.
and an understanding that architecture is about the client's vision. And while architects bring so much to the project, I think they really do have to demonstrate very early on that they understand what it is that the client is looking for, and while they bring so much to the table, will be able to work with that client in really achieving the client's goals.
Clients, yeah. So being client centered and client focused. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
architecture is a funny field because it really is very much about an art, but it also is a service.
Mhm.
Um, I think sometimes architects forget that it's a service industry.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. So last couple questions here. As a cost consultant, I've been a part of an architectural team for a design competition where the client specified a budget, but the actual winning team, which I wasn't a part of, the design came in, I would assume, well over budget. So my question is, how much does the construction budget play into selecting the architect?
So for us, it's very important. I
Mhm.
think it's part of that first discovery phase where we will not run any kind of process unless our client has a very clear idea of the money that they'll be able to spend. Especially when you're working with, projects that are funded by philanthropy, because you don't want to have to go back and ask a donor, hey, we thought it was going to cost this, but in fact, it really costs that.
Right.
So for us, it also, I think, is a number that helps architects think about their scope of work and their fee. That said, we are also very clear with our competitions that concept design is a starting point. It's
Mhm.
not the end goal, that it's a basis for design, that there will be this community engagement, this client engagement, this refinement. So I think it is absolutely key to show that you've understood it. And unless you have a really good reason for going over it, it's not a great idea. But unlike European competitions, where my understanding is that frequently you're held to an actual, budget
Mhm.
number. I think that American competitions have a bit of a leeway, but
Okay.
but for us, I mean, we really do. It's surprising to me to hear that, because I think it's a demonstration of, we really want to be as fair and equitable as possible, and demonstrate that, we mean what we say. And typically, the buildings, the design brief will say we want to spend this amount of money, and that's really what they want to spend.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. This project, to be fair, this wasn't an American project actually, and it was yeah,
Where was it?
it was in Europe, but it's been a while ago now. But just looking at the design that won, I just as a cost consultant, we knew that was going to be a lot more expensive than that budget demonstrated. And
Right.
looking at the news clippings and seeing the progress of it and the completed project, it was double the
It
amount.
was
So that's why
double.
it
Double.
was
Right.
double. It
Right.
was double. So like,
Right.
okay, how important is
Right.
it?
It's an interesting role of the cost consultant in a competition,
Right.
because, architects do want to show their very best ideas, but I think it's huge to be able to show that you can stay within the budget and still be hugely creative.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that leads me to second to last question here is so how do you advise organizations whose vision is bigger than their budget or their ability to raise funds?
Right. Well, part of our job is to align their vision with fundraising feasibility. And sometimes, it means really paring back the project. And other times it's saying, hey, you can utilize Dovetail to help you raise more funds. And in
Mm,
fact, many of our projects, the New York Public Library that we've been talking about, Jacob's
right.
Pillow, Storm King, because of the Dovetail process, they actually ended up raising more money than they ever thought they possibly could. Um, so I think it's a combination of, both understanding what you think you can raise and then us helping and saying, this is how the competition can actually really raise the profile, generate buzz. A number of our projects recently received money from Governor Hochul in New York, and it's because they're exhibiting design excellence. They did due diligence. It was a fair process, and they're exciting projects. So, we really do
Mhm.
elevate these projects.
Awesome, awesome. So what's next for you on your busy schedule for this new 2024?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm super excited that we just launched our new website.
Also,
Um,
I've seen it and I love it.
yeah,
Congratulations on
thank
that.
you very much. It was, it was a long time coming, and we enjoyed doing it, but
Mhm.
it was very exciting for us because, as you know, architecture is on elephant time, and we come on super early. So, sometimes it takes a while for the projects to
Right,
get
right.
built, but we have so much built work that it was super, super, super fun. And now we also have the capability to host competitions on our own website, which I'm
Oh, awesome.
very much looking forward to doing. So I think that will be great. I'm speaking next month, I think it is, or maybe in March, at the California Association of Museums, which I'm looking forward
Okay.
to. We've done a lot of work in LA. I love any excuse to go. So that should be really fun. And I'm excited to be in a number. We have a number of projects that have just started, which means that I can't talk about them.
Exactly. Understand that. Understand that. Yeah, yeah. You do it. Do you do a lot of speaking throughout the year?
I do actually. I was
Okay.
just in November, I guess it was, I was in Europe speaking, and one of the engagements was at the International Museum Construction Congress in Antwerp, which was a lot of fun. Best French fries I ever had.
I can imagine. So last question too. It wasn't on my list, but how if someone wanted to get into your line of work or work for you and to do what you do, what's the best route for them to go? Is it being an architect, or what's the best route to go?
To do what Dovetail does.
Yes,
Yeah,
to mm,
I think that having an architectural training is absolutely
okay.
key. I think that, for me, founding Dovetail was really, really very much about my understanding and speaking architecture speak and being able to converse and understand and read drawings, and then also be able to convey that and make that accessible to the public. I think it's a marrying of two worlds.
Mm,
So for me, I think it's a very sort of unique skill set. Because what we do has to be understandable to both architects, and it also has to be inspiring to people who
mm.
don't understand architecture. So,
Right, right, right.
crossing those two
Mhm,
very different lines.
mhm.
And sometimes I think architects don't help themselves in the way that they talk about architecture, which is a whole nother conversation. We're all for clarity in communication.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. So what final question is what's the best way that someone can connect with you or get in contact with you? I guess on your beautifully newly created website would be one way.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think there's on the website, you can fill out a form and you can send it to me. The website also has our info email address, which gets to me at some point. And we're always looking for fresh talent of all disciplines. And we work with cost consultants quite closely in our discovery phase. And we're always looking, feel free to reach out. I think the phone number of the firm's on there too. So if you're a young architect or an established architect, we're contacted daily, but we love I love knowing. I like to think I know everybody. I don't, but it becomes pretty close.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate your time. It's been certainly enjoyable and a learning process for me. So, and I know my viewers will be very pleased with the information that you shared. So, thank you again, Susanna, and enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend.
Well, thank you, Nakoto. I'm delighted to have been on, and I think you're doing a fantastic service for our field.
I
So,
appreciate that.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you. We'll
terrific.
see you
Thank
soon.
you. Okay, take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.